I'm remembering now why I put it down the first time, because I'm just not finding it that compelling. I'm going to see the film adaptation of Where the Crawdads Sing on the 13th of July. It is currently the 3rd of July, so I thought it would be a fun thing for me to read the book and then go watch the film and compare both of them together. I actually did get this book out of the library a few years ago now and read, I think, maybe 3 or 4 chapters, but I just wasn't feeling in the mood for it at the time. I'm hoping this time around I will enjoy it more. I have exactly 10 days to read it. It's only 368 pages, so I'm sure I can do it in that time. So yeah, having already read a little bit of it, I kind of know what to expect. I know that it's about a girl called Kyra who lives in a marshland in America. It's set in the late 60s and someone from a nearby town dies and she is accused of his murder. A friend of mine actually read this recently and mentioned that they found the ending really interesting, not necessarily in a good way. So now I'm kind of more curious to read it, because the sort of reason I put it down before was I just felt like it wasn't really going anywhere that interesting. So excited to see how I feel about this one. I only have 10 days, I better get reading. Just wanted to verbally underline this sentence. She's more pure and innocent than any of those girls you'd have me go to the dance with. Getting some very real, she's not like the other girl vibes from this book. It is now Wednesday. It has taken me since Sunday to read 100 pages. I'm remembering now why I put it down the first time, because I'm just not finding it that compelling. Which is interesting considering it's such a hugely popular book. Like it says on the cover, over 5 million copies sold worldwide. And usually with super popular books, at least the ones that I've read, for example, The Woman in the Window or The Girl on the Train, both those books I didn't necessarily think were like amazing, but they were really easy to read. Like I sped through them and I could understand why they were so popular, because they were really compelling and kept your attention. But this one, I'm just finding there's so much description over anything else. The plot is very slowly moving. It's to the point where I'm like, yeah, we get it, it's a marsh. There's lots of mud and water and birds and stuff. I'm not finding these descriptions that evocative, I'm just finding them quite repetitive. The book is switching between 2 time points. So we have Kaya, I think I called her Kyra before, her name is Kaya, short for Catherine somehow. We see her as a young girl and basically all her family abandon her in a hut on the marshes, and she learns how to fend for herself. And so we're slowly seeing her grow up through the years, at the same time as seeing chapters set in 1969 when the murder has happened. And so far these policemen have basically repeated over and over again, yep, there's no footprints, it's super suspicious, why are there no footprints around the body? Like, so much of that. It's not terrible, I'm not hating it as such, I'm just not finding any particularly good reason why I should keep reading it, aside from the fact that I want to finish it before watching the film. I do know that there ends up being a trial. I'm assuming that's going to be like the second half of the novel's structure is going to be this trial. I think I read some reviews where people didn't like that part of the book. They felt like it stopped the flow of the narrative or something. But I actually might enjoy that a bit better, because a sort of bit of courtroom drama is always fun, I think. I now have a week to finish the rest of the 260 pages that I have left to finish. So I'll update you maybe in the next 100 pages, or just whenever I feel like something else has happened that is worth talking about. I I finally finished this book yesterday. It's been interesting reading reviews on Goodreads because quite a few people actually said they thought it was more of a slog towards the end because there's a section where it turns into a courtroom drama, but that's actually the part that I found the most interesting because it finally had some pacing. Overall, I wasn't expecting a huge amount from this book, but it's definitely way worse than I thought it was going to be. For me, purely it's because of the writing. I just found it so amateur, especially the romance scenes. They were so cringy to read. They were so awkward. You have this main character, Kaya, who is a marsh girl. She grows up basically alone, aside from the friendship of a black guy who gives her petrol and his wife, and this other boy who lives in the nearby town called Tate, who teaches her to read. Aside from that, she's alone, so she has no sort of social skills or anything. So her whole character is being like a person who loves the marsh, loves the animals that lives within it. After she learns to read, she learns all the scientific stuff behind it. All that stuff could have been interesting, but then as soon as she realizes that she's like attracted to boys, she becomes giggly and obsessed in the most sort of cliche way. The book also constantly goes on about how beautiful she is, about how thin her waist is, how long her hair is. It does similar things to her two male love interests as well, you know, because of course we couldn't possibly read a book about unattractive people, could we? Aside from the terrible descriptions of the romance, I just found the descriptions of the marsh were so repetitive. All the characters were very one note. I was just mainly surprised at how amateur the writing was and how much of a slog it was to get through. I accidentally spoiled myself with the twist at the end because I was reading an article about how the author Delia Owens, her family is mixed up in a murder in Africa, which has a whole nother layer to this whole book and this whole author story. Definitely not one that they put on the blurb for sure. So instead of like being surprised by the twist, I was kind of just waiting for when the twist would be revealed. It's literally revealed in the last page, and this again was from something that I read on Goodreads, but someone pointed out about how that twist makes Kaya such a more interesting character than she was in this entire book, and how annoying it is that we didn't get to see that character, considering how much time we spent in her head. The character that we are with throughout the whole book is nothing like a person who could do the thing that is revealed in the last page. Obviously, the author and the publisher were going for the surprise element, but that surprise is not worth missing out on the character development that we could have had if it was even just more suggested throughout the book. It just felt like something that needed several more drafts to be something really readable and interesting. So I'm going to see the film tonight. I have to leave in about half an hour. I didn't click on the review, but I briefly saw like a 2-star review from The Guardian, so it's not looking promising, but I'm sort of hoping, like, taken out of the bounds of Delia Owens' really sort of strenuous writing style, that maybe the story could come to life a bit more and be a bit more interesting, but I haven't got my hopes too high. The thing I'm most interested in seeing is Daisy Edgar Jones as Kaya, because I just can't imagine her as a marsh girl. Obviously, she became famous through being in Normal People. She played Marianne. The other things that I've seen her in recently, I actually watched the first episode of Under the Banner of Heaven yesterday, and I also saw her in that film Fresh. She did actually play completely different characters from Marianne and completely different characters from each other as well. So I think she is quite a good actress, so I'm really curious to see her interpretation of the character. I'm a bit worried I'm going to not be able to tell the difference between the two men because they seem to have cast really similar looking men as Tate and Chase, her two love interests. Obviously, this is getting a lot of publicity because of Reese Witherspoon being a producer as well. She seems to have been quite heavily involved in the behind the scenes process of making the film. Anyway, we will see. I will come back to you with a final review of the film and a final like book versus film, what's better? I mean, so far, the film has a high chance of being better just by being not as bad as this book. So I'm betting on the film for this one so far. As you can see from the 2 clips that I remembered to take at the screening, I have now seen the film, so I'm here to give my final verdict. We actually got these bookmarks free at the screening, which are quite cute with a little feather illustration. Though I did see on the Sony Pictures Instagram, because obviously in Australia the big premieres for any big film happen over in Sydney usually. So on Instagram they usually just have like video and photos from the Sydney premieres. And for Where the Crawdads Sing, I saw that the people who got to go to that screening got like a free sketchbook as well as a bookmark. That's just a prime example of the discrimination that we face in Western Australia from people in the eastern states. So anyway, my thoughts on the film. I did think it was actually slightly better than the book for one reason only, and that is that I thought the structure was a lot better. So it starts off similarly in terms of it begins with the death of Chase Andrews and the two policemen examining his body in the mud, looking for clues, that kind of thing. But then it continues to show us Kaya being arrested, taken to the jail, meeting her lawyer. Whereas in the book, that doesn't happen until right towards the end when the trial is first introduced. And so the structure of the film becomes a sort of flashback narrative in terms of Kaya is telling this lawyer, or just telling the audience, how she grew up in the marsh, all the events that led to the death of this guy, and why she's on trial for his murder. So I thought that was a really good way to structure it because it keeps the story more engaging. If you're a little bit bored with one section of the storyline, the film will soon flip to the other side that might be more interesting. And it helps in the film, I think, to see events brought up for evidence in the trial and then to like visually see those events happening on the screen in the form of a flashback. That, to be honest, is the only positive thing I really have to say in terms of the way they adapted the book to the screen. In a way, it's a really faithful adaptation because it's really kept the same tone. It's kept the same romance-heavy angle of the story. It really does focus on Kaya's true romantic relationships with these two men who weren't actually that similar in the end because they luckily dyed one guy's hair brown and they were actually different enough to be able to tell the difference between the two of them. Except, funnily enough, I've watched a few interviews with Daisy Edgar-Jones and the guy who plays Tate. And twice I've seen him misnamed as the guy who plays Chase Andrews in the description of the YouTube videos of the interviews, as well as like written up on the screen when his face pops up, which is just so bad. Like, even if they are a little bit similar looking, it's literally your job to know which actor you're interviewing if you're a professional film journalism company. So that kind of made me laugh. But yeah, the film has definitely veered away from anything that could be called realistic to the point where Daisy Edgar-Jones as Kaya, she barely has a speck of dirt on her. Her hair is always perfect. She is obviously wearing makeup. She has a new outfit every single scene, and the scenes are quite short, so that's a lot of outfits. There is absolutely no sense of trying to make this a real depiction of someone living on a marsh in any way, and I was just mainly disappointed in that because there was a real opportunity here to create something quite good out of the story, or at least really examine what it might actually be like to be a young girl living alone on this marsh. The heavy focus on the romance. There's a certain voyeuristic element I felt to the way it was filmed. You know, we're meant to be enjoying the fact that these are young, beautiful people making out on a beach, which, you know, it's fine. I just didn't get the appeal. Otherwise, I don't really have anything different to say than what I've already said about the book. The twist, again, in the film is left right to the last minute and not done very well. We don't actually get to see it in action. It is just told via voiceover. So visually uninteresting and such a boring way to end the film. You could certainly say that the cinematography was quite nice. They made the marsh look very beautiful, but just the glossiness that was over everything made it feel so hyper real in a theme park kind of way. Like when you see videos of Disneyland and it just doesn't look like it actually exists. It doesn't look like a tangible place. That was kind of the feeling I got from it. I may have been more entertained if I hadn't just read the book and didn't know exactly all the plot points that were going to happen before they did. But as it stands, this was like a 2-star film for me. I found it very boring. The actors did the best with it that they could, but the material is just not there and the direction wasn't there to make it anything particularly interesting. So in terms of the book versus film part of the video, I would say the film is higher than the book purely because it's quicker. Like, you can just sit and watch this film in 2 hours rather than spending a whole time reading a book. Thank you so much for watching and following along with this journey of finding out about the hype of Where the Crawdads Sing. It was a really fun video to make. I would love to do more book to film adaptation type videos. So if you have any suggestions or ones that might be good to do, whether they're films that came out years ago or films that are going to come out soon, let me know in the comments. I will see you next time. Bye.